Perhaps you've seen it. Maybe in a dream. A murky, forgotten land. A place where souls may mend your ailing mind. You will lose everything once branded. The symbol of the curse. An augur of darkness. Your past, your future, your very light. None will have meaning, and you won't even care. By then, you'll be something other than human. A thing that feeds on souls, a hollow. Long ago, in a walled-off land far to the north, a great king built a great kingdom. I believe they called it Drang Lake. Perhaps you're familiar. No, how could you be? But one day, you will stand before its decrepit gate without really knowing why. Like a moth drawn to a flame, your wings will burn in anguish, time after time. For that is your fate, the fate of the cursed.
Have at me, bro. This is Omega 99 Nemesis, beginning officially my Dark Souls 2 Scholar of the First Sin lore play. I'm going to apologize if sometimes there will be a choppy scene or sometimes it'll seem buggy and when I talk. That's because I am having to cut and paste a lot of this footage together. Anyways, right now in Things Betwixt, the first area you're in, I'm unlocking the rusted coin, picking it up off this corpse, as I'm testing to see if the item displacements in Things Betwixt are still the same. For the most part, they appear to be, as the rusted coin, an item that grants an increased item discovery, is exactly where it was in the original version of the game, as well as another item I'm about to pick up. But I'm also currently exploring to see if anything else is new. The dog creatures back there, or kobolds, are also something I would recommend not fighting just yet, as you will get torn apart. Up ahead here, there's an ogre, which is an enemy you're not going to want to be able to fight until much later, as you'll get torn to pieces, and most likely, you will have to fight him. You will not stand a chance, is what I'm saying, because you'll have to fight him alone when you do so. So for now, leave him alone. I'm just coming by here to see if there's anything here. You don't even need to go towards the ogre. But when you get over here, you'll be across from that small rickety bridge. Go down here and around the corner to find a small, smooth, and silky stone. This will have later use, aside from the fact it heals you. It has another more valuable use, in my opinion. And right here is where we're going to meet the fire keepers.
What seems to be the ruckus?
Oh my, your face. The face of the curse. It's an undead. An undead has come to play. They all end up here. All the ones like you. You spoke to that kind old dear, didn't you?
You're finished. You'll go hollow. Yes, you'll become one of them.
Hollows prey upon men, feast upon their souls. This is the fate of the cursed.
What is your name? At least you know your own name. Here's your reward for sharing. It's a human effigy.
Take a closer look.
Who do you think it's supposed to be? Think back, deep into your past. Yes, it's an effigy of you.
Alright, so who those three ladies are basically these very old fire keepers. Something I will touch up upon later, but let's just say Anastasia from Dark Souls 1 may have gotten their retirement plan. Either way, what you're seeing now is the character creation screen, and which I have to admit is a pretty cool idea to design your character. I've also taken the liberty of already designing my own character, as well as giving him a name. I'll touch up on that as well later on what I call him and so forth. I've given him his own unique backstory. Anyways, what you're seeing here is that I've already gone through the body type and face type. If you want to make a simplistic design, that's where you're going to stick, but if you want to make advanced like I did, go to advanced settings. Next, you're going to want to actually pick your class out of 8 in total, each of which is ultimately irrelevant in the long run, but is a good place to get your build set up. The first class is the warrior, and the second best starting class in my opinion. It has decent abilities for melee and a good shield to start off with, and is the class I recommend for newcomers, as it makes the game much more approachable. I call the knight the 5th best because it lacks several pieces of equipment that would make it better. It lacks a shield but has great stats, and ultimately when choosing between the knight and the warrior, you have to choose between a shield or a stronger form. The swordsman is the best class in my opinion because of excellent stat distribution favoring a dex build, which the other two previous lacked, a +1 scimitar and a +1 short sword, but it does lack some of the health of other classes. The Bandit is the third best class because of its good dex value, superior health over the Swordsman, and its short bow, which you can only get a few in the game. However, it has the lowest intelligence of any character. The Cleric is easily the second worst class to start with due to terrible equipment, one piece of armor, a catalyst you can get 2 minutes from now, a spell you can get 10 minutes from now, and stats that make melee a punishment. The Sorcerer is the third worst, being slightly better than the Cleric in regards to having offensive spells and a catalyst and spell you have to go a little further to get by comparison. However, with just a dagger and low strength and dex, you're still ultimately helpless. The Explorer is the fourth best class despite his dagger because of his armor, which boosts item rate discover, his spell quartz ring, which limits magic damage, and the various items that can be used in and out of combat for various purposes. The Deprived, a staple in Souls games from what I've gathered, is technically the worst due to the fact he has no actual equipment. However, at level 1, he sets a basic standard to level up your character from the ground up and a challenge. Overall, the classes have no long-term significance, aside from the fact that when you look at your character sheet, you'll be seen as your class. So if you start off as a swordsman like me, it doesn't matter how you level up as a pyromancer, sorcerer, or a barbarian-style great axe fighter, you'll be called a swordsman. So that's really the only criteria I can see this matters. Would you rather be called a swordsman? I would. Next, you're going to pick a gift for your character. You can pick nothing, but I wouldn't recommend that. The Life Ring will provide a small buff to your max health, which will help offset the effects of advanced hollowing upon multiple deaths. However, this is a ring you can easily get very quickly into the game. Next, you can add a single human effigy to your inventory. This will restore your humanity after death and allow you to play online invasions and summonings, and you can also burn this at a bonfire to restrict those functions. Next would be the healing wares, a variety of life gems and poison moss to help you. This isn't as valuable unless you're new to the game. The Homeward Bone returns the player to the last bonfire rested at. Despite being a finite resource, it is not scarce. The Seed of a Tree of Giant turns all enemies in your world hostile to an invading spirit. This is extremely valuable in PvP. The Bonfire Ascetic raises the intensity of the bonfire it was burned at. It also respawns enemies and bosses related to that bonfire at a higher difficulty. Finally, the Petrified Something has a certain use that I will explain shortly. Needless to say, it has no actual use in combat. Personally, I would take the Seed of a Tree of Giants as it is the single rarest item in the entire game, one per playthrough, and I do not believe you can actually farm it like the rest of the items on this list.
All people come here for the same reason, to break the curse. You're no different, I should think. Doesn't stand a chance. Well, you never know. Go through the door and trot along to the kingdom. But remember, hold on to your souls. They're all that keep you from going hollow. Oh, I'll fool you no longer. You lose your souls. All of them. Over and over again.
After you've set your character up like I just did, you'll have 4 places to go. You can go up the stairs here to collect a human effigy from the chest, aka the very thing you could have gotten as a starting gift. I can only imagine how dumb some people would feel if they picked that item up and then went up that staircase. I'm doing that now after I've unequipped my short sword in favor of two-handing the scimitar and making my character slightly more agile. I'll touch up on the whole equip burden issue later. Anyways, yes, you get 1 effigy. You can also go back to farm the kobolds for souls. They won't drop anything as I recall. Or you can go back and fight the ogre, which will destroy you unless you're on New Game Plus, as you'll had to beat the game. Or you can go through this door to collect a torch and a soul of a lost undead and light the bonfire. The soul item, as there are numerous like, will grant you souls. This one 200 apiece, and the torch will grant you 5 minutes to light a torch for various purposes, though it is not as significant as you might want it to be. I apologize for the impromptu jump cut. I started this footage back on the day this game was released, April 7th, if I'm led to believe that was the release day, and had to spend a couple days getting my editing up to date. So today's Friday, and I am now going to start reading the lore of the items I've picked up to this point, which isn't much, so I figured I'd just get it out of the way now as opposed to later. We are going to start with the human effigy, as it is literally the first item in my entire inventory. A warm, soft, shadow-like effigy. Use this item to reverse hollowing. It also weakens the links to other worlds, preventing invasions and most cooperation. Peer closely at an effigy and one begins to perceive a human form, but whose form it takes depends on the person looking. From a gameplay perspective, using this effigy restores humanity after hollowing. But and if you burn it at a bonfire, a function you will unlock either here or at Majula, you will negate online play. You will not be invaded or summoned unless it's from an NPC invasion or an NPC summon. Aside from that, the effigy's overall lore is that it sort of replaces the humanity sprites. Whether or not humanity could coalesce into this form or not, I'm not fully sure in all honesty. I haven't had enough time to think about that. However, the effigy per your playthrough should always be seen as an effigy of you within the lore. According to this playthrough, the effigy would represent Lux Tenebris, the Tiger Knight of the East, an ex-Lion Knight of Ferosa who became a mercenary after the kingdom's fall to support his own wife, whom he and she both became refugees that later moved to Mira, where he had some family, as he was of extremely diverse and mixed heritage. Anyways, he became an undead after a while serving in his own mercenary company which he led, and later came to Drangleic after his wife perished, under mysterious circumstances that he himself no longer recalls. He can't remember his wife's name and is effectively tortured by the fact he can't remember and is trying to remember. And his overall, if he had a story arc, would be him struggling to remember and then struggling to keep the memory of his wife intact, all the while collecting souls to that end. And so there'd be a lot of drama. Either way, he would be a character described as living for adversity, for challenge. As the Tiger Knight, he was an incredibly talented, ruthless, but pragmatic warrior, favoring a challenge and facing adversity with a smile on his face. He wanted to be challenged, as he felt it would make him better, though this also meant he butt heads with a lot of people he shouldn't have. He was also an extremely skilled warrior. However, becoming undead has robbed him of many memories, his own combat training and combat experience being a part of them. So part of his quest would also be, as he acquires a myriad of souls, he begins to remember various things, and at the end of his plotline or playthrough, I'll tell you a bit more about what becomes of him. I may even do an actual sort of like a personal lore video on Lux Tenebris, but for now, that's all you need to know about him. Also, if you see his character screen and it says Owleron, that's simply because that's what I named everyone. I gave him the name Lux Tenebris after the fact. Next, we'll read on the Life Gem. A small stone made up of crystallized souls gradually restores a small amount of HP, often found near abandoned corpses as if it were what remains of the soul. From a gameplay perspective, the purpose of the Life Gem is to provide an alternative healing method to the Estus Flasks and Miracles. In this sense, the distinction between this and the Estus Flask is, for example, the Estus Flask can be upgraded to 12 swigs in general and reinforced its potency by 7. In total, this gives you 12 fully healed Estus Flasks that you can replenish at the bonfires. However, they are not necessarily perfect for healing small wounds. Life Gems allow players to heal gradually over a short period of time, and can even help them survive environmental hazards. On top of that, they're very handy for when you are trying to walk off a bad hit, but you don't want to waste the Estus on it. In total, though, the distinction is also that Life Gems and other healing items like it are a finite resource, though a very easily replenishable one if you know where to look. So you don't want to necessarily waste life gems on something as trivial as just farming methods, otherwise you're wasting time. Especially with the combining it with the life protection ring, one of the first things I'm gonna try and get, it's not something you need to worry about constantly using, as if anything it'll be a waste. I mean, it'll be easier just to repair the ring. But we'll get to that ring's lore as well as what it does later. All you need to know is that it's something you definitely want to have on hand, and in bulk if possible. On a final note, another practical application the life gem has is to counteract the health loss incurred by poison and bleed. Anybody who's gone through Blighttown and Dark Souls 1 would tell you this would have been a major saving grace. However, in terms of dealing with tricky opponents who inflict bleed or poison, or several areas that can cause where this is a common issue, it will keep you alive just a wee bit longer. But it is something you're going to want to have moss on hand for just to be safe. On a lore side of things, the description implies that the souls of individuals crystallize into these healing objects that we find off of corpses. It is hard to say definitively what this means. However, if I had to say, it would mean that the souls of lost undead that we oftentimes find might have actually been the previous versions of these life gems. That maybe we pick up a life gem, it was originally the soul of a lost undead that had been left alone for so long it became a life gem. As hollows are in fact have no practical use for souls aside to appease the hunger, they may not truly devour it, and so that might explain why we pick up these life gems later off of undead soldiers found in the Forest of Fallen Giants, for example, and possibly the last Bastille.